No one expected this interview to take such a sudden turn. One comment changed the entire mood in seconds. What happens when a routine conversation on live television takes an unexpected turn? Make sure to subscribe to Prime Voice and like and comment for more real talk show coverage. It begins like many segments on The View do, measured, conversational, and focused on a current topic that invites differing perspectives. The panel is seated. The audience has just settled after a commercial break, and the tone feels familiar. There's a sense that the discussion will be thoughtful but controlled, the kind of exchange viewers have come to expect from a daytime format that balances opinion with civility. On this particular episode, the conversation is framed around celebrity influence and responsibility, specifically how actors use their platform to speak on social issues. It's a topic that naturally brings in strong viewpoints, but at first, everything unfolds in a calm, structured way. Each co-host takes a moment to weigh in, building on one another's comments while maintaining a respectful rhythm. When Sunny Hostin begins speaking, her tone is composed but firm. She leans slightly forward, hands gesturing subtly as she explains her perspective. She emphasizes accountability, suggesting that public figures, especially those with large audiences, carry a responsibility to be thoughtful and informed when speaking on serious matters. Her delivery is steady, the kind that signals she's laying out a carefully considered position rather than reacting emotionally. The camera briefly cuts to the guest for the segment, Aaron Paul, who is seated across from the panel. He's listening closely, nodding at certain points, but there's a noticeable shift in his posture as the conversation develops. At first, it's subtle. He leans back slightly, then forward again, as if deciding when or how to respond. His expression remains polite but attentive. As Sunny continues, she introduces an example involving celebrities speaking out on complex issues without fully understanding the implications. She doesn't name anyone directly, but the generalization is clear. The discussion remains broad, yet it carries an underlying tension that begins to register with the audience. There's a quiet shift in the room, the kind that isn't loud or disruptive, but noticeable if you're paying attention. When it's Aaron Paul's turn to respond, he starts calmly. His voice is even, measured, and respectful. He acknowledges Sunny's point, agreeing that influence comes with responsibility. But then he adds a layer to the conversation that gently challenges the framing. He points out that expecting perfection or complete expertise from public figures can sometimes discourage meaningful engagement altogether. The exchange is still polite at this stage. There's no interruption, no raised voices, just a slight tightening in the pacing of the conversation. Aaron explains that many actors, himself included, speak out because they care, not because they claim to have all the answers. His tone suggests he's not dismissing Sunny's concern, but rather expanding on it. Sunny listens, but her expression shifts slightly. Her eyebrows lift just enough to signal that she's preparing to respond. When she does, her tone remains controlled, but there's a sharper clarity to her words. She reiterates that good intentions don't always justify public statements, especially when misinformation or oversimplification can have real consequences. At this point, the rhythm of the conversation begins to change. What started as a general discussion is slowly becoming more direct. The other co-hosts glance between Aaron and Sunny, sensing the shift. One of them offers a brief interjection, attempting to balance the viewpoints, but the focus quickly returns to the central exchange. Aaron responds again, this time with slightly more emphasis. He clarifies that he's not advocating for uninformed commentary, but rather for openness. He mentions that conversations evolve, and that public dialogue, even imperfect dialogue, can lead to greater understanding over time. His hands move slightly as he speaks, reinforcing his points without becoming overly animated. The audience remains quiet, attentive. There's no laughter or applause, just a collective focus on the conversation as it unfolds. It's the kind of moment where viewers at home might lean in a bit closer, recognizing that the tone has shifted from routine discussion to something more nuanced. Sunny replies once more, and while her voice remains steady, there's a noticeable firmness in her delivery. She emphasizes that the impact of words matters just as much as the intent behind them. Her argument is precise, grounded in her background as a legal analyst, and she speaks with the confidence of someone accustomed to making clear, structured points. Aaron listens, nodding slightly, but when he speaks again, there's a subtle change. His response is still respectful, but more direct. He gently pushes back, suggesting that holding public figures to an almost unattainable standard can create a climate where people hesitate to speak at all. He frames it not as a disagreement with Sunny personally, but as a broader concern about the nature of public discourse. The tension isn't dramatic, but it's real. It's the kind of exchange that feels authentic to live television. Two individuals with different perspectives engaging thoughtfully, even as their views diverge. The pacing slows just enough to allow each point to land, and the pauses between responses become slightly longer. One of the co-hosts steps in again, this time more deliberately, attempting to bridge the gap between the two perspectives. She acknowledges both points, highlighting the importance of responsibility while also recognizing the value of open conversation. It's a familiar move in panel discussions, designed to maintain balance and keep the segment on track. Still, the focus remains on Aaron and Sunny. Their exchange has become the centerpiece of the segment, not because it's confrontational, but because it's clearly defined. Each is articulating a position with clarity, and neither is backing away from their perspective. As the conversation continues, the body language becomes more telling. Sunny maintains her forward-leaning posture, signaling engagement and conviction. Aaron, meanwhile, sits upright, occasionally leaning in as he responds, showing that he's fully invested in the discussion. Their eye contact remains steady, reinforcing the seriousness of the exchange. The studio atmosphere reflects this shift. The earlier lightness of the segment has given way to a more focused, thoughtful mood. It's not uncomfortable, but it is noticeably more intense than where things began. And as the segment moves forward, it becomes clear that this isn't just a passing disagreement. It's a moment where two perspectives are being explored in real time, with all the nuance and complexity that comes with live television. As the conversation continues, the shift in tone becomes more noticeable, not because anyone has raised their voice, but because the pacing has changed. There's a slight pause between each response now, the kind that suggests both sides are choosing their words more carefully. It's still respectful, still measured, but the discussion has clearly moved beyond surface-level agreement into something more deliberate. Sunny Hostin takes a moment before speaking again, briefly glancing toward the other co-hosts as if acknowledging the broader panel, then returning her focus to Aaron Paul. When she resumes, her tone remains composed, but there's a sharper emphasis on accountability. She clarifies that her concern isn't about discouraging people from speaking, but about ensuring that when they do, they understand the weight their words can carry, especially in an era where statements can spread instantly and widely. Her phrasing is precise, and she uses a hypothetical example to illustrate her point, describing how a public figure might unintentionally influence public opinion in a way that oversimplifies a complex issue. It's not directed at Aaron personally, but it's clear that she's reinforcing her position in response to what he said. Aaron listens without interrupting, nodding slightly at parts of her explanation. When he responds, he begins by acknowledging her concern again, almost as if to make it clear that he's not dismissing it. But then he adds another layer, explaining that there's also value in people using their platforms to start conversations, even if those conversations aren't perfect from the beginning. His tone remains calm, but there's a subtle firmness now that wasn't as present earlier. He explains that in his experience, many actors don't claim to be experts, but they feel a responsibility to engage with issues that matter to them. He suggests that the expectation shouldn't be perfection, but rather a willingness to listen, learn, and adjust over time. The exchange remains controlled, but the dynamic has shifted into something more back and forth. One of the co-hosts leans in slightly, appearing ready to interject, but pauses, allowing the conversation to continue naturally. It's a moment that reflects how live television often unfolds. Producers and panelists alike sensing when to step in and when to let a discussion develop. Sunny responds again, this time focusing more directly on the idea of influence. She emphasizes that even when intentions are good, the impact of a statement can be significant, especially when it reaches millions of people. Her voice remains steady, but there's a noticeable clarity in how she structures her response, almost as if she's building a case point by point. She also briefly references the role of media platforms, suggesting that talk shows, interviews, and social media all amplify what public figures say. It's a broader point, one that expands the conversation beyond just individuals and into the systems that carry their messages. Aaron takes this in, pausing for a moment before replying. That pause is noticeable. It's not long, but it signals that he's considering how to respond carefully. When he does speak, his tone is still respectful, but slightly more direct than before. He points out that while influence is real, audiences are also capable of thinking critically and forming their own opinions. He adds that assuming people will simply accept everything a celebrity says without question might underestimate the audience. It's not a dismissal of Sonny's concern, but it reframes the conversation slightly, shifting some of the responsibility toward the viewers themselves. There's a brief reaction from the audience. Nothing disruptive, just a soft murmur that reflects engagement. It's the kind of subtle response that happens when a point resonates with some viewers while others are still considering it. Sonny acknowledges his point with a small nod, but she doesn't fully concede it. Instead, she responds by saying that while audiences are capable of critical thinking, not everyone approaches information the same way. She highlights that certain messages can have a stronger impact depending on how they're delivered and who is delivering them. At this point, another co-host steps in more clearly, offering a perspective that attempts to bridge the gap. She suggests that both points can coexist, that public figures should be mindful of their influence, but also shouldn't feel completely restricted from speaking. Her tone is lighter, aiming to ease the tension slightly while still contributing meaningfully to the discussion. The moment brings a brief shift in energy. There's a small ripple of agreement among the panel, and the conversation seems like it might move in a more balanced direction. But the focus quickly returns to Aaron and Sonny, whose exchange has become the core of the segment. Aaron responds to the co-host's comment by agreeing, noting that balance is important. He reiterates that his main concern is creating an environment where people feel encouraged to engage, even if they don't have all the answers immediately. His delivery is steady, and his body language remains open, hands occasionally moving as he speaks, but never in a way that feels aggressive. Sonny listens, then adds one more point, this time with a slightly more personal tone. She explains that her perspective comes from seeing how information can be misinterpreted or taken out of context, particularly in legal and media settings. It's a subtle shift from general commentary to something rooted in her own experience, which adds weight to her argument. The exchange, while still calm, now carries a deeper sense of conviction from both sides. It's no longer just about abstract ideas. It's about how those ideas play out in real-world situations. The pauses between responses remain, but they feel more intentional, as if each person is making sure their point is fully understood before moving on. The audience continues to watch quietly, with occasional nods and small reactions visible in the background. There's no overt disruption, but the engagement is clear. It's the kind of moment that holds attention, not because it's loud or dramatic, but because it feels genuine. As the discussion progresses, the moderator begins to subtly guide the conversation, asking a follow-up question that opens the floor slightly. It's a strategic move, designed to keep the segment flowing while also giving space for different viewpoints. The question is broad enough to include everyone, but it still ties back to the central issue. Aaron responds first, keeping his answer concise but clear. He emphasizes again the importance of dialogue, noting that meaningful change often comes from conversations that evolve over time. He doesn't repeat his earlier points exactly, but builds on them, reinforcing his overall perspective. Sonny follows, offering a similarly concise response, but maintaining her emphasis on responsibility and awareness. Her tone remains steady, and her posture unchanged, still forward-leaning, still engaged. The exchange between them begins to settle slightly, not because either has changed their position, but because the main points have been clearly established. The tension that built earlier doesn't disappear, but it stabilizes into something more balanced, a recognition that both perspectives have been fully expressed. And as the segment moves forward, it becomes clear that what started as a general discussion has turned into a focused, thoughtful exchange. One that reflects the kind of real-time dialogue that live television can create when different viewpoints are allowed to unfold naturally. As the discussion settles into a more measured rhythm, there's a noticeable shift in how everyone at the table engages. The earlier back and forth between Sonny Hostin and Aaron Paul has clearly defined the central issue, and now the conversation begins to expand slightly, allowing space for reflection rather than immediate rebuttal. One of the co-hosts leans in and reframes the discussion with a broader question about where the line should be drawn between personal expression and public responsibility. It's a subtle but important pivot, less about who is right and more about how these situations are navigated in real life. The tone remains calm, but there's a sense that the conversation has matured into something more layered. Aaron takes a moment before responding, and that pause stands out. It's not hesitation, but consideration. When he speaks, his voice is steady, and his words are more deliberate than before. He explains that from his perspective, the line isn't always clearly defined, especially in an environment where people are encouraged to share their thoughts openly. He adds that many public figures are still learning in real time, just like everyone else, and that growth often comes through dialogue rather than silence. As he speaks, his posture remains upright, but there's a slight softening in his expression. It's clear he's not trying to win the exchange, but rather to clarify his position. His hands move minimally now, suggesting a more reflective tone compared to earlier moments. Sunny listens closely, her expression focused. When she responds, her tone remains composed, but there's a noticeable emphasis on clarity. She agrees that growth is important, but reiterates that the stakes are higher for those in the public eye. She explains that while everyday conversations allow room for trial and error, statements made on large platforms can have immediate and far-reaching consequences. There's no interruption, no overlap in their voices, just a steady exchange that feels carefully managed. The audience remains quiet, but attentive, with the occasional nod or shift in posture indicating engagement. Sunny continues by adding that part of responsibility involves recognizing when to step back and listen, rather than speak. It's not presented as a criticism, but as a guideline, something she believes helps maintain trust and credibility. Her delivery is calm, but firm, and it carries the weight of someone who has thought deeply about the issue. Aaron nods as she finishes, acknowledging her point before responding. He agrees that listening is essential, and he makes that clear right away. But then he adds that speaking and listening don't have to be mutually exclusive. He explains that many conversations begin imperfectly, and that public dialogue often evolves through a combination of both. His tone remains respectful, but there's a subtle emphasis that signals he's standing by his perspective. He's not dismissing Sunny's point, he's refining his own. That distinction becomes important in how the exchange continues. At this stage, the moderator gently steps in again, not to interrupt, but to guide. She thanks both of them for their perspectives and introduces another angle: how audiences interpret these conversations. It's a strategic move, shifting the focus slightly away from the speakers and toward the viewers. Another co-host adds to this, suggesting that part of the challenge lies in how messages are received. She points out that even well-intentioned statements can be interpreted in different ways depending on the audience. Her tone is lighter, but the point is serious, and it adds another layer to the discussion. Aaron responds to this by acknowledging that interpretation is complex. He agrees that messages can be misunderstood, but he also notes that this is true for everyone, not just public figures. He suggests that while influence amplifies the effect, the underlying challenge of communication remains the same. Sunny listens, then responds by refining her earlier argument. She emphasizes that while misunderstandings are common, the scale matters. A private conversation and a televised statement are not the same, and the expectations should reflect that difference. Her tone remains steady, but there's a slight increase in emphasis, as if she's reinforcing a key point she wants to be clearly understood. The exchange remains calm, but the contrast between their perspectives is now fully visible. Aaron continues to advocate for open dialogue and growth, while Sunny maintains her focus on responsibility and impact. Neither position shifts significantly, but both are expressed with clarity and consistency. The audience's attention doesn't waver. There's a sense that this is the kind of discussion viewers appreciate, not because it's dramatic, but because it feels real. The pacing, the pauses, the careful choice of words, all of it reflects the nature of live television when a topic resonates on a deeper level. As the conversation continues, there's a brief moment where both Aaron and Sunny speak almost at the same time, then quickly pause and gesture for the other to go first. It's a small interaction, but it stands out. It reflects mutual respect, even in disagreement, and helps maintain the tone of the segment. Sunny resumes, offering one more clarification. She explains that her concern isn't about limiting voices, but about encouraging thoughtful engagement. She reiterates that influence comes with a level of responsibility that shouldn't be overlooked, especially when discussing complex or sensitive issues. Aaron responds with a similar tone, acknowledging her clarification and reiterating his own. He emphasizes that encouraging people to speak responsibly is important, but so is creating space for those conversations to happen in the first place. His delivery remains even, and his body language continues to reflect engagement rather than defensiveness. At this point, the conversation begins to feel more like a dialogue than a debate. The initial tension has softened into a steady exchange of ideas. The differences remain, but they are no longer escalating, they are being explored. One of the co-hosts takes the opportunity to lighten the tone slightly, making a brief comment about how these kinds of discussions reflect the diversity of perspectives at the table. It draws a small, appreciative reaction from the audience. Nothing loud, just a subtle shift that brings a bit of ease back into the room. The moderator nods, acknowledging the comment, and begins to guide the segment toward its next phase. She thanks Aaron for his input and transitions to a related topic, but not before giving both him and Sunny a chance to offer final thoughts on the discussion. Aaron goes first this time. He keeps his response concise, emphasizing the importance of continuing conversations even when they're difficult. He speaks calmly with a slight nod, as if reinforcing his earlier points without repeating them directly. Sunny follows with a similarly concise response, reiterating the importance of awareness and responsibility. Her tone remains steady and her posture unchanged, signaling consistency in her perspective. As both of them finish, there's a brief pause, a natural moment where the conversation could either continue or conclude. The moderator chooses to move forward, smoothly transitioning into the next segment. But even as the topic shifts, the impact of the exchange lingers. It's the kind of moment that doesn't end abruptly, but instead settles into the background, leaving viewers with something to think about. And while the show moves on, the conversation between Sunny Hostin and Aaron Paul remains a clear example of how live television can capture real, thoughtful dialogue, measured, respectful, and grounded in genuine perspective. Even as the show transitions into the next topic, the atmosphere in the studio doesn't fully reset right away. There's a subtle carryover from the earlier exchange between Sunny Hostin and Aaron Paul. Not tension in a negative sense, but a lingering sense of seriousness. It's the kind of shift that happens when a discussion has clearly resonated, both with the panel and the audience. The moderator introduces the new segment with a lighter tone, aiming to bring the energy back to a more typical daytime pace. The topic itself is less heavy, something more aligned with entertainment and current events. And one of the co-hosts makes a brief, upbeat comment that draws a small laugh from the audience. It's a natural reset, the kind that keeps the overall flow of the show balanced. Aaron remains engaged, turning his attention to the new topic as it's introduced. His posture relaxes slightly, and there's a brief smile as he responds to one of the lighter questions. It's a noticeable contrast to the earlier part of the segment, where his focus had been more intense and deliberate. Now, his tone shifts to match the change in subject, reflecting the adaptability expected in a live talk show setting. Sunny also adjusts, though in a more subtle way. Her posture remains composed, but her expression softens. She listens as the conversation moves forward, occasionally adding brief comments that align with the lighter tone. The earlier firmness in her delivery gives way to a more conversational style, signaling that the more serious portion of the discussion has concluded, at least for now. Still, there are small moments where the earlier exchange seems to echo. At one point, a co-host makes a passing remark about public perception and how quickly opinions can form, even in entertainment contexts. It's not directly tied to the previous topic, but it carries a similar theme. There's a brief glance between Sunny and Aaron, subtle, almost unnoticeable unless you're paying close attention, but it reflects an awareness of what was just discussed. The audience appears more relaxed now, responding more openly to the lighter elements of the segment. There are a few moments of laughter, some applause, and a general return to the familiar rhythm of the show. But the engagement remains strong, suggesting that the earlier conversation hasn't been forgotten. It's simply settled into the background. As the segment continues, the moderator circles back briefly, not to reopen the discussion, but to acknowledge it. She thanks Aaron for his thoughtful input earlier and notes how valuable it is to have open conversations on the show. Her tone is appreciative, and it serves as a quiet recognition of the exchange without reigniting it. Aaron responds with a nod and a short comment, expressing appreciation for the opportunity to share his perspective. His delivery is calm and concise, consistent with how he handled the earlier discussion. There's no attempt to revisit the points or extend the debate, just a simple acknowledgement. Sunny also adds a brief remark, echoing the importance of dialogue. Her tone is steady, and her words are measured, reinforcing the idea that while they may not fully agree, the conversation itself was worthwhile. It's a moment of mutual respect, conveyed without any need for elaboration. The show then moves fully into the new topic, and the pacing picks up slightly. The questions become quicker, the responses shorter, and the overall tone more dynamic. It's a reminder of how live television operates, balancing moments of depth with segments designed to keep viewers engaged across a range of topics. Aaron participates comfortably, answering questions with a mix of humor and sincerity. His body language is open, and there's a natural ease in how he interacts with the panel. It's clear that despite the earlier disagreement, there's no lingering discomfort affecting his presence on the show. Sunny continues to engage as well, contributing to the conversation in a way that feels consistent with her role on the panel. Her tone remains composed, and she maintains the same level of attentiveness, listening closely and responding thoughtfully when prompted. As the segment progresses toward its conclusion, the moderator begins to wrap things up. She thanks Aaron again for joining the show and briefly summarizes some of the topics that were covered, including the earlier discussion. It's done in a way that highlights the value of the conversation without revisiting any specific points of disagreement. The audience responds with warm applause, reflecting an overall positive reception. There's no sense of division or discomfort, just an appreciation for the discussion as a whole. It's the kind of reaction that suggests viewers recognize the exchange as a meaningful part of the show, rather than a disruptive moment. Before the segment ends, there's a brief moment of light interaction among the panel. A co-host makes a casual comment that draws a smile from Aaron, and Sunny adds a quick response that fits the tone. It's a small exchange, but it reinforces the sense that the earlier disagreement has been left where it belongs, in the context of a thoughtful discussion. As the cameras begin to pull back slightly and the show prepares to transition to a commercial break, the overall atmosphere feels balanced again. The earlier intensity has given way to a more familiar rhythm, but the impact of the conversation remains. Behind the scenes, there's often a level of coordination that viewers don't see. Producers monitoring timing, adjusting segments, and ensuring that everything stays on track. While none of that is visible directly, the smooth transition from a serious discussion to a lighter segment suggests that the show maintained its structure effectively, even as the conversation evolved. For viewers watching at home, the experience likely feels complete. They've seen a range of perspectives, a moment of genuine exchange, and a return to the broader format of the show. It's the kind of balance that daytime talk shows aim to achieve. Informative without being overwhelming, engaging without becoming confrontational. And as the segment closes, the final impression is one of professionalism and composure. Both Sunny Hostin and Aaron Paul have maintained their positions while also respecting the format and each other. The disagreement didn't escalate beyond what's appropriate for live television, and it ultimately contributed to a broader, more meaningful conversation. The show moves forward, but the moment remains a clear example of how differing perspectives can be handled in a live setting, calmly, thoughtfully, and with a focus on dialogue rather than conflict. As the show returns from the final commercial break, there's a sense that the episode is moving toward its conclusion, but the earlier exchange between Sunny Hostin and Aaron Paul still lingers in a subtle way. Not as tension, but as something that added weight to the overall broadcast. The pacing is steady, the tone composed, and the panel settles into the closing rhythm that regular viewers would recognize. The moderator begins to wrap up the episode with a brief recap of the day's discussions. It's done in a balanced, neutral way, touching on the lighter segments while also acknowledging the earlier conversation without revisiting any specific points of disagreement. The phrasing is careful, emphasizing the value of open dialogue and diverse perspectives rather than focusing on differences. As she speaks, the camera briefly cuts to Aaron, who sits with a relaxed posture, listening attentively. There's a small nod as his earlier contribution is referenced, but he doesn't interject. His expression remains calm, consistent with how he carried himself throughout the segment. Across the table, Sunny maintains her composed demeanor, hands resting lightly as she listens, her expression neutral but attentive. When the moderator invites final thoughts, the responses are brief and measured. One of the co-hosts offers a general reflection on the importance of conversation in today's media landscape, noting that discussions don't always have to end in agreement to be valuable. It's a statement that feels aligned with what viewers just witnessed. Sunny follows with a concise closing remark. Her tone remains steady, and she reiterates the importance of awareness and responsibility when speaking on public platforms. It's not a repetition of her earlier points in full, but a distilled version, clear, direct, and consistent with her perspective. There's no added emphasis, no attempt to extend the conversation, just a calm closing thought. Aaron is given the final word among the guests. He keeps it simple, thanking the panel for the discussion and emphasizing the importance of continuing conversations, even when perspectives differ. His delivery is even, and there's a slight nod towards Sunny as he finishes, a small gesture that reflects mutual respect without drawing attention to itself. The audience responds with warm applause, filling the studio with a steady, appreciative sound. It's not overly loud or dramatic, but it carries a sense of approval. The reaction suggests that viewers in the room saw the exchange as thoughtful rather than contentious, something that added to the show rather than disrupted it. As the credits begin to roll, the panel shares a few brief off-script moments, small smiles, quick comments, and light exchanges that aren't fully picked up by the microphones, but are visible enough to convey a relaxed atmosphere. It's a reminder that while the conversation had its serious moments, it remained within the professional boundaries of live television. For viewers watching at home, the experience doesn't end with the broadcast. Almost immediately after the episode airs, clips of the discussion begin circulating online, particularly the moments where the exchange between Sunny and Aaron became more focused. Short segments are shared across platforms, often highlighting specific points from each side. On social media, reactions start to form quickly. Some viewers express agreement with Sunny's emphasis on responsibility, noting that public figures do carry a unique influence that requires careful consideration. Others align more with Aaron's perspective, appreciating his point about the importance of open dialogue and the value of speaking up, even while learning. The discussion online mirrors the tone of the segment itself, largely respectful, with people sharing differing viewpoints without it becoming overwhelmingly negative. There are, of course, moments of stronger opinion, but overall, the conversation reflects the balanced nature of what was presented on air. Clips from The View are replayed in commentary videos and discussion threads, with viewers analyzing the exchange in detail. Some focus on the specific arguments made, while others comment on the tone, body language, and pacing of the conversation. It becomes clear that what stood out wasn't just what was said, but how it was said. In the hours following the broadcast, a few media outlets pick up on the segment, summarizing the exchange as a thoughtful discussion rather than a heated confrontation. The coverage reflects the same measured tone, emphasizing that while there was disagreement, it remained respectful and constructive. Behind the scenes, it's likely that the production team views the segment as a success. The show maintained its structure, the conversation stayed within appropriate boundaries, and the audience remained engaged throughout. These are the kinds of moments that daytime talk shows aim for, authentic exchanges that resonate without becoming disruptive. In follow-up interviews and discussions, the broader topic of celebrity influence continues to come up, with references to the conversation adding context to ongoing debates. While neither Sunny nor Aaron revisits the exchange directly in a public way, their perspectives remain part of the larger conversation. For regular viewers of the show, the segment becomes one of those moments that stands out, not because it was dramatic, but because it felt real. It reflected the kind of dialogue that people have in everyday life, just on a larger stage. The balance between differing viewpoints, the measured tone, and the mutual respect all contribute to that impression. As the episode fades out and transitions into the next program, the final takeaway is clear. The exchange between Sunny Hostin and Aaron Paul wasn't about winning or losing an argument. It was about presenting perspectives, listening, and responding in a way that kept the conversation grounded. And for viewers, that's often what makes these moments meaningful. Not the disagreement itself, but the way it's handled. If you watched this segment, or if you've seen the discussion online, share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Prime Voice for more narration-based talk show stories.